On one Friday afternoon in 1959, Canada canceled what many considered the most advanced fighter jet on Earth and fired 14,000 people the same day, not over weeks. That afternoon, then it did something stranger. Within months, every single aircraft was cut apart with blowtorches. The tooling was smashed. The blueprints were destroyed. Even the models were wiped out. Today, more than 60 years later, not one complete Avro Arrow exists anywhere in the world. The best preserved piece is a nose section in a museum in Ottawa. That's all that's left of it. And here's the part that still stings for Canadians. The engineers didn't disappear. Within weeks, American recruiters showed up, and the men Canada threw out that afternoon went on to help put human beings on the moon. So why would a country erase its own greatest achievement so completely? Stick with me, because the reason for the cancellation is actually quite reasonable. The reason for the destruction is where this gets strange. Had to understand the Arrow? Look at a map. Because Canada faced a defense problem nobody else did. In the 1950s, the nightmare was Soviet bombers carrying nuclear weapons over the North Pole. The shortest route ran straight across Canada's Arctic. That made Canada the front line, and it had to stop those bombers before they reached anything that mattered. But Canada is enormous and mostly empty. There were no air bases every 100 miles, so it needed a very specific aircraft, one that could climb extremely high, sprint huge distances, find a bomber in the dark, kill it, and get home. Nothing on the market did that well enough. So Canada built its own at the Avro plant in Malton, Ontario. Canada wasn't trying to match everyone else's fighter. It was solving a problem no other country actually had. And what its engineers produced was remarkable. The CF-105 Arrow was a big, white, delta-winged interceptor that still looks modern today. It first flew on the 25th of March, 1958, flown by a Polish-born test pilot named Janusz Żurkowski, and it handled beautifully from the start. 5 aircraft flew, making 66 flights and about 70 hours of testing, reaching roughly Mach 1.98, almost twice the speed of sound. But here's the detail most people miss. Those aircraft were flying on borrowed American engines, fitted only because the Arrow's own engine wasn't ready. Canada was building that too, the Iroquois, a far more powerful engine developed at home, designed to push the Arrow well past what those test flights showed. An Arrow never flew with one installed. It reached nearly twice the speed of sound on engines it wasn't even designed for, and the world never saw what it could really do, because while the test pilots were still exploring it, the politics underneath were collapsing. The 20th of February, 1959 began like any normal day at Malton. Then, early that afternoon, Prime Minister John Diefenbaker stood up in the House of Commons and announced the Arrow was finished. Word reached the factory almost immediately, and Avro didn't wait. Layoffs were announced that same afternoon. Around 14,000 people gone in a day. Counting the 650 supplier companies, tens of thousands more lost their jobs. A national industry evaporated between lunch and dinner. And here's what made it worse. A full review of the program was already scheduled for the end of March. Everyone expected a decision then. Diefenbaker announced it 5 weeks early with no warning. It wasn't only the cancellation that Malton never forgave. It was the ambush. Families had moved across the world for these jobs. Now the answer arrived without a knock on the door. Here I have to be fair because the emotional story and the factual story pull in different directions. The government's reasons weren't stupid. The program had become enormously expensive. Over $1 billion committed by a country of about 17 million people, funding a world-class fighter, a world-class engine, and its own radar and missiles essentially alone. The strategy had shifted too. The Soviets were racing toward intercontinental ballistic missiles, weapons that arrive from space in 30 minutes. An interceptor built to shoot down bombers can do nothing about a missile. So Ottawa bet on missiles instead, buying the American Bombardier system, and nobody else wanted to buy the Arrow. Canada tried selling it to the United States and Britain to share the cost. Both were funding their own programs and said no. Canceling the Arrow was a defensible decision made by serious people facing an impossible budget, which is exactly why what came next has never made sense. Canceling a program is normal. What Canada did afterwards was not. By July 1959, every aircraft had been cut apart with blowtorches, not mothballed, not stored, not sent to a museum, scrapped. The jigs and tooling were destroyed. The blueprints, drawings, and models were ordered destroyed as well. Officially, there's a boring explanation. The Arrow was classified, and destroying classified material was fairly standard practice, with genuine fears about Soviet spies. But the sheer thoroughness shocked even people who supported the cancellation. This wasn't tidying up, it was erasure, and to many Canadians it felt personal, as if someone wanted to make sure the country could never look back and wonder what it had lost. Governments cancel weapons all the time. They don't usually take a torch to them in public. That erasure is exactly why the Arrow became a myth instead of a policy debate, complete with rumors of hidden survivors for decades. But one man quietly refused. In 2020, it emerged that a senior Avro draftsman named Ken Barnes, ordered to destroy program documents, took the blueprints home instead and kept them in his basement for decades. Now the part that turns this from a sad story into an extraordinary one. Canada laid off those engineers. It didn't make them any less brilliant, it just made them available. And across the border, NASA had existed for under 5 months. Its small team assigned to put an American in space was desperately short of people who had actually built complex flying machines. NASA's recruiters moved within weeks. The Arrow's chief aerodynamicist, Jim Chamberlain, led about 25 Avro engineers south, a group that grew to roughly 32 straight into NASA's Space Task Group. There they became lead engineers, program managers, and heads of engineering on Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. Read that again. The men dismissed on a Friday afternoon in 1959 helped design the spacecraft that landed humans on the moon 10 years later. Others went to Britain and worked on Concorde. Canada didn't just cancel an aircraft, it exported the team that would help take humanity to another world. So that's the Avro Arrow. A world-class fighter canceled for reasons that were arguably sound in a way nobody could forgive, then destroyed so completely that Canada was left with a nose section in a museum and a permanent national ache. Here's the lesson. The decision and the handling of the decision are two different things. Ottawa may well have been right that Canada couldn't afford the Arrow. But by giving no warning, firing 14,000 people in an afternoon, and burning everything, it turned a difficult budget call into a wound that still hasn't healed 67 years later. Park one aircraft in a museum, and the Arrow is a proud memory instead of a national grievance. And the deepest cost was never the metal. Aircraft can be rebuilt. A generation of engineers, once they've packed up and moved to another country, doesn't come back. If you like stories about the programs that got erased, subscribe. That's what this channel is for. And tell me in the comments, was destroying every trace of the Arrow a sensible security measure or something closer to spite? I read every reply. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.